This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 1st of February 2023 at home in Wicklow, and in it I talk about the work I am currently doing with Broken Talkers Theatre Company in a production that's all about masculinity, and I talk about the issues that it's raising for me, and all the thoughts and emotions, responses, impulses that are being stimulated and provoked by the work, which is at times challenging, but always stimulating and inspiring. So I talk a little bit about men and attitudes to women, and recall my own memories of being a teenager and the attitudes that my male friends and I shared towards women. I also talk a little bit about prominent male voices in recent times and these times, and their influence on men and boys, and I question what they're offering. And then I conclude today's episode with some thoughts on the child within. So that's what's coming up. I hope you can find time to listen to it, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. I hope this moment finds you well. So, what's going on? It's the 1st of February as I record this. So, happy St. Bridget's Day. Bridget is one of many saints, and she may be one of your favourites. I know almost nothing about her. There's a cross that goes with Bridget, and there's a cloak associated with Bridget because she asked for land, apparently, on which to build her convent, I think. And the landowner said, "I'll give you a piece of land as big as your cloak." And so she made an enormous cloak that covered a substantial piece of land, and that's what she got. So she was crafty, and fair play to her, because mother is the necessity. Mother is the invention. Necessity is the mother of invention, is what I was trying to say. Excellent, we're off to a good start. And do you know what I'm saying to myself today? What I'm saying to myself is, stay relaxed, stay calm, and don't worry about it. Just let it flow, because it's been a busy week. It's been a bit full on. There's been a few little things going on, and there hasn't been much time to prepare for this. And as was happening towards the end of last year, there is a tiny window that I've got to use. So this will be, out of necessity, a shorter episode than usual. Now, just briefly, if you are someone who's new to the show, or the tell, as I prefer to call it, because it's all tell, no show, until I make the jump to video. But here on The Clear Out, all I do, week in, week out, is discuss wellness and coping with what life throws in its various ways and forms. And I'm very interested in the idea of wellness as something that is very grounded, that is very down to earth, authentic, unassuming. I'm a big fan of the idea of internalized wellness, not show pony wellness, not check out my abs wellness, not here's me in my swimwear wellness. I mean, that's all out there, and it serves its own purpose, I guess. To me, there's always an aspect of that screams, I need affirmation. So I try to just kind of stay away from that performative wellness, that hyper positive wellness, and stay in a place that's real. And often this is just coming from my own life, my own experiences, my own perspective. I try not to make claims to have solutions for anyone other than myself, but I share my own journey and offer my own thoughts and reflections. I'm not unafraid to have an opinion, but I always try to contextualize things and give due reference, if not reverence, when that's appropriate. And I suppose all of that combines to be a version of a sort of an oral examined life. So every time I try to explain what I do here, the definition, the account of the oeuvre changes. So be it, because as my old friend Heraclitus liked to say, this river I step in is not the river I stand in. Did he say that? Is that attributable to an ancient Greek philosopher? Anyway, what Heraclitus did say, I paraphrase, is life is flux. That's flux. I couldn't give a flux. Yeah, so flux rhymes with ducks, but it's with an X, not a CKS. So yeah, life is flux. Things change, things move, and even though there is the illusion of constancy, the illusion that you're always there, you're always the same, you're not always the same. We change, we shift. We are not made from rock. We are malleable beings, and we change, experience. But but like rocks, life works on us. It never stops working on us. It never stops blowing. It never stops that process of shaping, of eroding, and that can be challenging. But what choice does a rock have? You got to just breathe into it and go, okay, here I am. If I'm the cliff face getting blasted by the wind that never ceases, I'm going to have to lean into it. So yeah, so it is what it is. It is what it is. In any case, today, my head is full of different things. As I've mentioned over the last couple of episodes, I have been rehearsing this really interesting theatre production with Broken Talkers Theatre Company. So I've been up in Dublin a few days a week rehearsing that, and this is a piece of work that is all about masculinity. Masculinity in its various forms, but this work is informed by workshops that were conducted with groups of marginalised young men in different parts of Dublin, and so it does reflect a lot of their concerns, and certainly it reflects certain models of, I mean, and I'm being careful with the language I use, because language can be, the choices that I would make might be very subjective, but certain expressions of masculinity seem to come up again and again that maybe weren't as broad as they might have been, to give these young men a greater range of possibilities in terms of the male role models that they saw or espoused, or whose values they espoused. So in any case, without getting into the nitty gritty of that, all I can say is that my head at the moment, because of the work we're doing and what we're bringing into the space every time we get into it to rehearse, my head is full of thoughts and emotions and impulses and memories, all in that area of shaping, the process of shaping a man, and what's out there in the world that shapes men and makes young boys into the men that they become. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to. It's a big stream of stuff to try and swim in. It's a big stream of stuff to step into and have wash over you, and try and maintain one's focus and maintain one's artistic focus in terms of the work that we're doing. And I walk out of these rehearsal sessions feeling pretty exhausted, without fail, even though it's very inspiring work, and I am delighted to be doing it. But yeah, there's a huge amount in the mix, and so many other things come up. And to me, certainly the way my brain works, and this impulse I have to talk, I suppose, and to analyse and talk and reflect and respond and share and stimulate conversation, that is overwhelming at times in this context. But in the context of a rehearsal room, it's it's not appropriate. It's not appropriate because we've got to be disciplined. This is a lean schedule. There's not that we just don't have the time to indulge too much that veers away from the central track. So yeah, there's a balancing act to be achieved. I had really been hoping that my daughter would be able to see the show from a purely, I think from a very vain point of view, to kind of go, I'd like my daughter to see me do some work in an acting space. So yeah, purely, a very selfish motivation. And also I remember going to the theatre as a kid and the effect it had on me, and the thrill of being exposed to live actors in a space. But I was reading through the script last night, and I was given the more of the script and got a stronger sense of the content of the piece, and I was disappointed to see that under no circumstances would it be appropriate for my daughter to see this piece. And I was talking to the producer about it today, and it's an over 16s. It's got an over 16s rating on it, so there's just some material in the production stuff we haven't rehearsed yet, but it gets pretty raw, and that's coming from a very it's coming from a very organic place. It's coming from the workshops, and it's coming from what young men are exposed to. And this particular section that I came across last night reading was very much to do with young men's attitudes to women and how those attitudes are shaped by what they're exposed to at a young age, particularly from the world of pornography, particularly the hyper sexualization of women. And what I have referred to in the past, if not here on the podcast, certainly in a piece I wrote for the blog, this idea of women only being as useful or as valuable as their sexual utility. And I use that phrase deliberately. It's a particularly callous, unfeeling phrase, because I think it captures the real truth of absolute objectification, and really looking at women as flesh. And so that as a message, you think, if you're a young fella, a young guy, a kid who has been exposed to that sort of sensibility at a young age, and it's been delivered in a very matter-of-fact way, that's a very shaping element in a young man's life, and it's not one that I believe has a lot of value, if any, because there's a world of difference, I think, between being able to look at someone and finding them attractive or beautiful or desirable on that external level, and then internalizing that as the only thing that's of interest, and particularly the way that can be internalized as almost as a form of currency that can relate to the kind of into a kind of initiation into status seeking or status giving. And I certainly remember when I was a teenager, amongst my male friends, there was certainly, well, we were obsessed with, at a certain point, we were obsessed with the idea of losing our virginity. We were obsessed with that idea, and certainly fantasized relentlessly about that possibility, no matter how far away it was in reality. And certainly as we moved from mid-teens to late teens, certain of our group had that experience, and I mean, we afforded those guys this sort of I mean, I don't want to say a godlike status, because that's not right. It wasn't quite as elevated as that, but certainly they were treated almost like prophets, because they had knowledge of the mystery, and knowledge of the ecstasy, knowledge of the other that they could share with us. And I mean, I look back at that, and you can hear the amusement, I think, and the affection in my voice, because I can say with confidence that I don't think myself and my male friends were particularly exceptional in our attitudes to girls. We happened to all to be straight lads, and were attracted to girls, and we weren't mean-spirited about it. We were immature. We could be casually insensitive, certainly. We slagged our female classmates and the objects of our affection. But I think, like, my memory is that on a very fundamental level, we respected girls, we expected our female peers, but we were just horny kids and horny male teenagers, and that any disrespect was coincidental, accidental, and if intentional, loaded with humor that wasn't meant to hurt. I don't know. And so, I mean, I did actually speak about this quite a bit last year, in the wake of it was Aisling Murphy, wasn't it? The young female teacher who was killed, in Offaly, wasn't it? I did a long episode just discussing this whole idea of male attitudes. I think basically I called the episode, it was something to do with broken masculinity, and scared women. I can't remember the title exactly, but it was roughly a year ago. It was January of last year, and I did speak about this and many aspects of this. So if you're interested in this topic, and want to put it into a context of misogyny and male violence, and vulnerable women, I suppose, and into sort of a gender wars conversation and a toxic masculinity conversation. That's a phrase I don't really value, even though I recognise what it describes. You could do worse. If you're interested in those things, you could do worse than go and listen to that episode from last year. But in any case, I was very tired last night looking at that script. I was really knackered. I was looking at it on my phone, and I need a new prescription in my glasses. For my eyes, so my glasses are not quite doing the job I want them to do, so I was squinting and tired, and as I say, very disappointed to go, oh right, my daughter won't be seeing this show anyway. I'll just have to try and get more work, won't I? And then maybe she can see her old daddy doing something on the stage that's more age appropriate. Whatever that might be, I don't know. Another thing I saw in the script, and this I'm not trying to, these aren't spoilers. It's just, and when I say script, I should say there was a section of the script that was really just putting down things, tracts of text, some things that had come up in rehearsals, and they're just there as kind of reference points. And there were a couple of extended pieces in the text, in the script, from Jordan Peterson and also from Andrew Tate. And I know not a lot about Jordan Peterson. I mean, I feel I know enough. And I know almost nothing about Andrew Tate, except that I think he's currently in custody in Romania, for, is it sex trafficking charges? Have I got that right? But Andrew Tate is a young man, maybe he's in his 20s, who has become a very high profile sort of men's speaker and male issues influencer on social media, and I'd only come across him because of his name being in the headlines before Christmas, around the time he was arrested. I know very little about him, but I know one of the guys in the show I'm rehearsing was talking about giving a dance workshop to young boys, and they were all talking about how great they thought Andrew Tate was, and just to jump across to Jordan Peterson for a millisecond. I mean, Jordan Peterson is the Canadian academic who came to some prominence a few years ago when he jumped in on the pronouns debate, where someone who doesn't wish to be identified as male or female might choose to be identified as they rather than he or she, and to use the possessive, to use them instead of him, her, and Peterson was objecting to the proposal in Canada that be written into law in Canada as a right, that people could say, these are my pronouns, and you will honour them. And I think Peterson's position at the time was, this is the road to fascism. And of course, it was a very notorious thing to say, and it got him a huge amount of attention. And then that seemed to give him a great opportunity, the increased profile, to share his own kind of views on how people should live, and particularly, he seemed to become particularly popular with men, and giving them a sort of a template for living. And he wrote and produced his very popular book. Is it the 12 Rules? Is it just called the 12 Rules? I didn't read it. I've glanced at it. I've skimmed through it. I've seen what some of the rules are. And he just became this phenomenon. And I've always been pretty indifferent to him, and found there wasn't much he was saying that I felt was revolutionary or massively inspiring. I felt when he talked about psychology, because that was his background, I felt he was always saying fairly solid stuff. And then I realised when I dug a little deeper, he had some rather out there ideas that seemed to involve lobsters. And look, whatever, best of luck to Jordan Peterson. He went, he was vilified and demonized and became this kind of bugbear of the left, and seemed to find himself at the kind of at the sort of the flashpoints of the culture wars and identity politics, and seemed to really love his moment in the spotlight, was my impression. And again, I'm not saying that in a snarky way. I think there was an opportunity, like he was an academic, and I was like, oh cool, now people are listening to me, well, I'm going to take this opportunity to say what I think. And certainly there was an aspect of what he was saying that was a bit sort of appealing to maybe more traditional male values, to be strong, to stand up straight, to take care of business, to not be afraid to punch another man. And yeah, grand. And he and Andrew Tate, what they seem to have in common is they seem to have filled a void of some kind. And that void seems to be the empty space where a father figure might be. Particularly a father figure that boys or young men want to listen to. Or maybe it's a father figure that validates and gives a green light to their anger, to their sense of personal injustice or rejection or disadvantage, and gives them permission to vent that anger and direct it at those who they believe are the are major kind of contributory elements to their personal unhappiness. And in some cases that seemed to be, and I'm not saying that this was advocated by Peterson, but it did seem to be like a lot of men would turn and direct that anger towards women. And I just found it all very, very, very dubious, very fishy. And certainly when I was looking at this tract of text that was in the script from Andrew Tate, and again, I'm not sure how this will be utilised in the production, if at all, but he was talking about the sort of the uselessness of therapy, and how no one should be going to therapy, and that therapy is the choice of a weak person, and it's certainly not the choice of a man of action. And it was just this diatribe against therapy and therapists and people who would put themselves in that seat to offer therapy, and people who would put themselves in the seat across from the therapist and receive therapy or engage in that process. And I just found myself thinking, what's so terrifying to this guy about therapy, and what's so terrifying to him about the idea of being weak, or being perceived as weak. And I feel again that there's crossover with Jordan. I feel Jordan Peterson. I feel there was crossover there with Jordan Peterson. I feel that was one thread of his rhetoric, or one thread of his. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll use that word, rhetoric. Something he'd kind of come back to, the idea that you wouldn't be afraid to get your hands dirty and mix it up and punch another guy on the chin. And I thought, well, yeah, that's grand if you're sitting in a staff room in a nice university in Canada with a bunch of bookish academics. It's very easy to feel like an alpha male if you've decided you're willing to punch people when you're surrounded by people who are very cerebral and genteel. It's a different story if you're among genuinely tough men, if you're among a group of men who routinely fight or get into fights, who routinely settle things with their fists. That's a different thing, isn't it? Suddenly Jordan Peterson might not be so quick to say, yeah, I'm going to sort this guy out, because he might be knocked on his ass very, very quickly. Anyway, that's just an observation. And again, I'm not trying to throw shade on Jordan Peterson. In fact, I think he certainly ended up in not great shape a couple of years ago, when I think he was, I mean, my impression was he'd had a very serious breakdown and some serious health issues, and was on medication. And there just seemed to be this huge pile-on, just this gleeful schadenfreude to go, look at him, look where he is now, hiding in Russia. And I just felt that was kind of in poor taste as well, even if he may have been annoying at times. But I suppose what I come back to when I see the popularity of these figures, it does make me think, as always, and this is a recurring theme in terms of my own thinking around these trends, these issues, these kind of sociological phenomena, where these influencers or speakers have such an extraordinary impact on such a large number of people, and there often seems to be an element, to some extent, there often seems to be an element of radicalization, and I just find myself thinking, where are the other voices? I mean, you've heard me speak about this when talking about politics. Like, where are the other voices that are appealing to something else? And I don't know if the success of people like Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, maybe someone like Joe Rogan, who to my mind is in a similar group, a similar group of sort of hyper confident, hyper confident, hyper certain men who are very quick to dismiss others and very quick to denigrate, certainly in Rogan's case and Tate's case, very quick to denigrate other men in very kind of traditionally, stereotypically macho terms, by referring to them as either, pussies or bitches. And I'm like, yeah, again, like the second I hear that stuff, I'm like, okay, that's what we're dealing with. Now, as it happens, I don't know. And again, this is, I haven't consumed a lot of their content. So these are kind of sketches and impressions, but I kind of trust my instinct. Tate and Rogan, they both like them, to muscle up. They both like to build those bodies. And I don't know if there's just, and this might be absolutely uselessly reductive and uninformed, but it feels like there's a disproportionate amount of testosterone, and a disproportionate speed to slap people down, a disproportionate willingness to kind of quickly slap people down, and put them in their place and be the dominant male in the room. Again, I'm like, I really question the value of that message. And I don't know. I just go, come on. There has to be something else out there. But the point I was going to make was, these guys have enjoyed success, at an age where the internet, social media, technology, devices, screens, the tentacles of those things have never had further, more effective reach. And I just wonder if there is a strong connection between young guys being exposed to all this stuff online. I'm not going to talk about what young women are exposed to, because that's a whole other thing, and certainly something my wife and I would be quite concerned about, I suppose, when we think about our own daughter, who's only 9, and her next few years. And we're just hoping that we can kind of steer her on I can't speak for my wife, but I mean, I hope that we can steer her on a path of some sense and some good decision making, and that she locates her sense of self, from within, and from, good friends around her. Because obviously as she gets older, she'll move further from us and trust our opinion less and less. So I'm just hoping we can keep her on side. Yeah, this could be famous last words. If this podcast is still going, in 3, 4, 5 years time, I might have a very different story to tell. But at the moment, thank goodness, my daughter's very happy to talk to me about a lot of different stuff, and I cherish that aspect of our relationship. But yeah, this idea that these, and like I say, young men, but I have friends. Dara has friends. I have friends younger than me. So let's say 10 to 15 years younger than me. And maybe even not as much as that. And they were big Jordan Peterson fans. So it's, that's a big range. And just for the sake of my argument today, if we're talking about the young kids that the dancer, one of the guys in the show, was talking about being big fans of Andrew Tate, my impression was those kids were my daughter's age or a little bit older, maybe 10, 11, 12. And they were talking about Andrew Tate being a really cool G. I think G stands for guy or good guy. I think, yeah, he's a real cool G. He's a G. And this, which is hilarious to me. Like, this would be a bunch of Irish kids using that kind of language. But that also is the influence of the internet and the malleability of the language that we speak and how it comes across via other media, and how it changes and becomes incorporated and internalized and then is worn and spoken as part of one's personal flair or knowingness. But yeah, if you think then that then there's guys, that's like a 25 to 30 year range in terms of the influence of these kind of men's speakers. And as I say, I don't know, it's like, where are the other voices? And I suppose this is a little bit like, it's not cool to listen to the boring, sensible person. It's cool to listen to the edgy, dangerous person. Is it as mundane as that? Hey, let's go over here and listen to this guy. He talks about being thoughtful and considerate and reflecting and being tolerant of other people's different choices. Yeah, I want to be in that club. Or I can listen to this guy who has got sort of a rage against the machine energy and is saying, yeah, you're angry. Yeah, you should be angry, and this is why. And let's fuel that. And you're dead right to feel the way you do. Again, is that the way to go? Is that a good message? Is that helpful? Rather than challenging that state in young people, rather than offering them productive and controlled ways to express their emotions, their discontent, their anger, their frustration, their fear. I don't know. I just think some of these guys are either acting in bad faith, so they're bad actors. Not like me, not that kind of a bad actor. Boom, boom, I'm here for the rest of my life. Or they're just very egotistical, and are, I don't know, like an egotism that sort of forbids reflection, and forbids sort of true healthy kind of self-criticism, healthy self-examination. And of course, I'm a big advocate of this, and then I suppose you hear me speak like this, and in a way, I'm putting myself in direct opposition to these men of whom I speak. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying this for no reason. I mean, I really believe. I believe in the idea of encouraging thoughtfulness and consideration and compassion from a very young age. If that's, if there's an opportunity to have that conversation and express those ideas in an appropriate, digestible way, I'm like, yeah. And I'll give you an example. Okay. I was teaching karate in a school, and there was a class, and it was clear, and this was in a primary school, and these were young kids. They were only, I'd say they were only about 7, and it was a class of boys and girls, and the dynamic in the group, particularly between the boys, was really not nice. There was a dynamic that was mean-spirited, a dynamic that was always kind of teetering on the verge of an explosion. There was a sort of a fractious and anxious bullying energy that passed between them. These were young kids who were very quick to jump on someone and poke fun at them or draw attention to a moment of vulnerability or fragility. And it was having a very detrimental effect on the dynamic for the entire group. And I only had this group, I was only had them for like a half an hour kind of kids karate class. But I remember when I'd observed them for a few sessions, a few weeks in a row, and I came in and I just saw this thing kind of playing out week in, week out. And I just took it upon myself to kind of have a chat with them one day. And I just picked someone up. Like the second that they jumped on this, and I'm not saying this jump literally, but the second someone laughed, one of the boys laughed at another one of the boys for a moment of confusion or of failing to execute something I was asking them to do, or saying something that wasn't quite right, or maybe, I made a good-natured joking response to it. And another boy laughed at the first boy, and you could see the first boy, you could just see all the emotion in him. All the emotion, all the sensitivity, and you could feel he was hurt and angry and just so raw. And I just got on it straight away. And it's like, don't do that. You don't want someone to laugh at you if you're in his position. So why would you do that? And I just kind of gave the whole group a little chat about caring for each other and looking out for each other, and trying to have each other's backs. And I pointed out to them that they were going to be with each other for the next, 5 or 6 years. The same group, that they'd be together for another 5 or 6 years. And I was like, you want to pull together and be a team, be a unit, and support each other and help each other. And that's going to be so much better for you than this kind of teasing and this point scoring. No, I didn't use that phrase, point scoring, but that was the general thrust. And I wasn't shouty, I wasn't angry. I'm standing there in my karate suit with my belt on, and I wasn't there to intimidate them, and I had them, and I know from my experience as a teacher, when you've got a classroom of students who are actually engaged and staying with you. I've experienced the opposite enough to recognise when it's going well. And yeah, I had them, and it was a lot. It was a very serious talk for a group of kids that age, and I stayed away from the big words, but I did hit them with the big concepts, which fundamentally were love, and I didn't use that word, but caring, caring for each other, togetherness, minding each other. And I just said, that's what's going to actually make you stronger. That's what's going to make you stronger, doing all of that. Anyway, I think they just reverted to form the second I left the building. Oh, good luck. But at least I tried. Excuse me, sorry. and sometimes that's all you can do. That's all you can do. I do actually believe in that. I believe in the power of the gesture, and I believe in acting on one's positive intention, one's positive impulse, because I think that is a force for good in the world. Anyway, one thing I wanted to return to from last week's episode, and I'm going to finish up with this. So as I say, this is going to be a shorter episode than usual, and I know my wife needs to get into this room very soon, so I need to vacate. But one thing I wanted to point out last week, when I was talking about my older brother and reminding myself, much to my own amusement, if not yours, of how he used to sing "Morning Has Broken" as a little boy, and I did refer to it and say that it was kind of a beautiful thing, because that boy, there's not a lot of evidence of that boy anymore. Not a lot of evidence. There hasn't been a lot of evidence of that boy. There's been no sign of him for many, many years, and there's a complex adult with very complex things in his life, and less than ideal choices at times. But I did want to make the point last week, and I forgot to, and this is a larger sort of point about how we look at people who we find challenging or are difficult or disappointing, and this might be so pathetically naff, but I think it's to remind ourselves that inside everyone, and maybe even more so inside people who outwardly are maybe not doing that well, or are not, or have kind of turned their back on their better selves, that inside them there is that child, that vulnerable younger self that is a million miles from where they are, or how they appear on the outside. And again, I'm not advocating sort of trying to bring that child out in someone. I mean, that's deeply, deeply personal stuff, and can be loaded with trauma and damage and all kinds of complex coping mechanisms. But it may be of use to help you, and when I say you, I mean me in this case. I think it helps to just get a bit of perspective, to just open up that door to compassion, a little bit more, and remind yourself it's not all this product, it's not all this behavior, that there's something else. I mean, I feel that's very relevant to men particularly. There's a lot of men who move away from their more innocent, vulnerable selves, and they make that move at quite a young age, and it's part of that front they feel they have to put on. It's part of stepping into a stereotypical toughness, abandoning softness, abandoning easy openness or silliness, because they feel that this is the only way to survive in the world. And I think many men maybe find a way out of that through good relationships, through partners that encourage that side of them to thrive within the adult self. But a lot of men don't find that for various reasons, and I think that is central to a lot of damaged masculinity and related behaviours. So yeah, just something to think about. something to think about. And just as a general sort of wellness exercise, or mind, a thought exercise. I was going to say a mind game, but that's got very negative connotations. Do a mind game on yourself. It's just to remind yourself, of what's inside. What's that kind of core self you're protecting, or minding, or nurturing, or maybe neglecting. Is it the inner child? The inner child, that's probably a bit of a, that's I don't know how much cachet that concept has anymore. But I continue to find that valuable, and something worth paying attention to. I think it can inform a lot of our understanding of how we respond to things as adults, and it's part of the individual journey. It's not a blame game. It's not about seeking answers elsewhere. It is just about kind of tuning in and going, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's why I do that, because of that. Anyway, I'm doing this because of lots of things. And I'm going to finish up here today. It is time to say goodbye. So, there you go. I hope you got something out of that. I hope it was of some interest. And I'll be back next week with another episode of This Tell. You can find me on social media. The links will be wherever you're listening to this episode. You can throw me some love, throw a comment. You can subscribe, you can like, you can share. And if you are someone who's listened on a regular basis and you value what I do here, and it brings something to your week, it brings something to your ears, to your mind, to your soul, to your heart, you could consider supporting the show via the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. There's also a supporter link for a one-off donation if you want to support this independent enterprise. I'd welcome any of those things I just mentioned. I especially welcome the love. Okay, so that's it. I will leave it there until next time. Stay safe, mind yourself, travel well, and I will see you real soon. All the best. Bye bye. Cheers.